The following program was made possible by a grant from Rolex Corporation.
Welcome to Kentucky, the Ultimate Trial, the 1982 Rolex three-day event. Hello, I'm Nigel Casserley here at the Kentucky Horse Park, and with me is Denny Emmerson, a former Olympic three-day event rider.
Nigel, what we're here to see is sort of a triathlon for horse and rider that takes place over 3 days and has three separate tests. The first day is the dressage, a series of intricate controlled maneuvers, not unlike the compulsory figures in figure skating. This is designed to test the obedience of the horse. The second day is the tough day. That's the speed and endurance day, 10 miles over 25 massive natural obstacles, much of it at a gallop. The third day is show jumping, a more precise form of jumping designed also to see whether the horse is still sound and fit from the day before.
And now for the first phase of the competition, dressage.
Good afternoon, and welcome to 36 Years of Rolex with Nigel Casserley, the voice of Rolex. I'm going to let Nigel introduce himself to everyone. Hi, Nigel.
Well, the official Rolex time is now 3:03.
And what would be happening at this point in time if we were actually at the Kentucky Horse Park on the Saturday?
Well, we would be getting to the end of cross country, and it looks as though you are at the Kentucky Horse Park, but I happen to know that you're down in Roanoke County, up the Shenandoah Valley from me in wild and wonderful West Virginia.
Yep, and so Nigel, since they're not having Rolex this year, or they're not having Land Rover, I thought it would be fabulous to spend some time with you and reminisce about the 36 years that you narrated the horse park, and really give us some in-depth and really behind-the-scenes stories that you might be able to share with us.
Yeah, probably some we can't share with you, but that's all right. Well, it's lovely to be here. And before we get going, I would just like to send a thank you to all the people who are looking after everybody during this COVID disaster that we're in. And if anybody has lost any friends, my sincere condolences to you all. So, do you want to know how it all started?
Yes, please.
Well, it all started in July '68, when I came over here for 2 months. It was a very long 2 months, 50.
July 78?
No, 68. I came
68.
over here in 68. I landed up at Morven Park working at Morven Park as a groom the year they opened, when the first 12 riders at Morven Park had 2 horses, and we looked out, and there were 3 grooms, and we looked after them. And it was a very different Morven Park a few years later when Major Lynch took it over and ran it with 80 wonderful thoroughbred horses. And how I started announcing was that Joe said in May of '74, would I announce the first event that they held at Morven Park? And then I was in the wine trade at the time, having got out of the horse business. And in '76, I rang Trish Gilbert, who was then running the Blue Ridge Horse Trials, which was the selection trials for Montreal, and said, did she have an announcer? Well, I actually said, did she have a...
Just froze. And what did you ask her, Nigel? You froze for a second.
I said that I called her and said, did she have a commentator for the event? And she said, no, she didn't. So I said, well, I can't possibly do the event unless I come down and see the place. And I went down and met Trish. And as I was leaving, I said to her, well, you do have a sound system, don't you? And she said, no. And I, for some unknown reason, said, well, don't worry, I'll bring one. Well, that's 1976, and what's that, 46 years ago now. and here we are.
Yeah. So it's amazing how that it seems like so long ago, and yet it seems like yesterday in some ways. You know, when
not when I look in the mirror.
Oh, speaking of which, I'm gonna just find a little picture here of you in the early days, and I'm just gonna bring that up. That is not it. Hang on. Of you announcing. There it is. And I'm just going to share my screen here. Let's get that out of the way.
I hate to think what you're going to bring up.
I know. But this one you should know. This one will be okay. You recognize this one, right?
That was Essex horse trials. And the Labrador at my feet, there is Roger Haller's Paddy. In the car is Prissy. And literally, this was the back of the Volvo, and was the horse inspection at Gladstone.
Oh wow! And then is the lurcher there on the left?
I'm having a serious brain fart.
That's okay. So what year was this?
Oh, very early. This is maybe 77. Somewhere around there.
And then you started announcing at the horse park before it was even the Rolex 3-day event. Is that correct?
Yeah, 77. The first horse trials they had at the horse park was 76, which was a Pony Club Championships. And then in 77, as a test event, they had the North American Junior Championships, and then the 78 World Championships follow.
So I managed to scrounge around and find some footage of the 78 World Championships. So I'm going to see if I can't pop that up on the screen and see if we can. It was narrated by, I believe, Bruce. Yes, narrated by Bruce Davidson. But, you know, it's amazing that there actually is some footage hanging around from those days, because it was quite a long time ago. And I'm just.
Well, it was an extraordinary event held in Lexington, Kentucky, in the middle of nowhere, for a sport that nobody knew, and we had 100,000 people at it. It was just extraordinary.
How did the word get out?
I have no idea how they did it. I have no idea how these people turned up. It was absolutely amazing.
And so I'm just going to scroll it back here and just play this a little bit.
When he first went in the ring, he wanted to look up and see the people in the stands.
And the thing that is so amazing about this footage is to look at the horse park and see what it looked like back then compared to what it looks like today when they have the 3-day event.
Well, what you're looking at now would be the covered arena. I mean, that is where the covered arena is now, which is extraordinary.
Oh, wow. And I know that when we get to the show jumping phase, it's a grass arena. There's no stands. People are sitting on the banks.
Absolutely. It was a grass arena for a very long time.
And so you announced there, were you announcing with other people? Because I heard when I listened to this video, I heard other voices.
They brought over a man from Germany, a man called Fritz Balkwitz, because he spoke 5 different languages. And he did the majority of the announcing, and I held his hand most of the time.
So what was it like setting up for this World Equestrian Games? This a major event with 100,000 people in the middle of what was basically a field.
Well, it was a field. I mean, the horse park had literally this and a set of 4 barns and the grass arena up by the lake. And that was it. Was that Mike Plum?
I think so. Let me just back that up a second. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah, that chin was. Yeah.
And I'm sure you can recognize a lot of these people by their back. Yeah. So do you remember what horse that is?
It could have been. Was that Better and Better? I can't remember that long.
I think it might be. I know he rode Better and Better in '82 because I've been watching that footage for quite a while. I'll just pop the sound back on for a second.
Because of that, I went really slowly out of the box.
So I believe this is Bruce.
I think so, and Mike Tango.
Oh, right. I remember that horse.
Oh, a wonderful horse.
He
His
bred
career
gallop, and that's
entirely too early. It was a shame.
What happened to him?
Basically, he got cooked here at the World Championships, and he never.
Oh, he was a young horse here, wasn't he?
Yeah, very young.
Yeah. And back then they had the roads and tracks and steeplechase, which they don't have anymore. So for people who, not everybody's familiar with those phases, how about just kind of giving us a little bit of an overview of what the competition was back like
And
back.
that was steeplechase fence.
Yeah, I'll just back that up.
It's solid and as big as that, and that's now what would be in the infield. And you can actually, I haven't been there since 2014, but Jenny Lane Crossing, which they don't do anymore. They keep it all within the park. But if you carry on further down the hill where they're going now, is where the thoroughbred retirement place is too.
Oh yeah, the Maker's Mark Secretariat.
Yeah,
Center?
yeah.
Yep, looks like a bunch of fields.
Well, it was all a part of, cracky, what's the name of the farm? When they split the farm there, and 1,200 acres went with the horse park. Look at the crowds. I mean, it's just amazing, the crowds there.
And so, where did they all? I mean, 100,000 people coming to the horse park to Lexington. I was a grad student in Kentucky from '81 to '86, and I don't recall that there were ever places for people to stay that would be accommodate that.
Well, people were staying in Cincinnati. I mean, they were all over the place. It was absolutely staggering.
It's just some amazing footage.
Yeah, great pictures still.
Yep. And I just went rambling around on YouTube and kept searching back to see if I could find anything. And so there's 3 parts to this video. That's 78, and just truly amazing footage that we can all still enjoy. So tell us a little bit about the way eventing was done back then, in terms of the phases and the point of the phases.
Very different. It was speed and endurance on Saturday, and you started off with roads and tracks, phase A, which was, if I've got to remember now, 3 to 5 miles. You then had about a mile of walking to come into the steeplechase. And then you did the steeplechase, which was 2.5 miles, if not a bit more. Then you went to the vet box for 10 minutes and then out on cross country. I mean, you're looking at a total of as much as 25 miles.
And so the horses had to be incredible.
hang on. After steeplechase, you then went out on phase C, which was 7 or 8 miles of trotting. So you had to have a very fit horse, and it was a very different game. I have to say I miss it.
And there was a reason behind those phases, right?
Say again?
There was a reason why they had those different phases, the roads and tracks, steeplechase, roads and tracks before the cross country.
Well, it was taken from the old military. It was making sure you had a horse that was fit enough to go to war. And so that's how they based it originally. And then you finished up with show jumping, having been in battle all day on Saturday, that you could actually get back on your horse and parade in a parade ground. It was a very, very different game.
Yeah. And so you were setting up, did you set up the sound for that event, or was that later when you started to do the sound?
They did the sound with a firm in Lexington. They put in, just for the communications from the fences, 22,000 feet of wire, which is about 5 miles of wire. Then the next year, when I did the sound for the first time in '79, I went to use a little bit through a culvert on the Bonnie Boulevard, and it didn't work. So 22,000 feet of wire just went out the door. It was extraordinary.
Oh, wow. And so basically what you do is make sure that you can be heard so that people know what's going on wherever they are on course. Is that correct?
When we were doing the sound, there wasn't anywhere on that horse park that you couldn't hear what was going on. Whether you were in the concessions, in the trade fair, you could hear absolutely everywhere. But it took us 66-man days to set up and take down. It was an enormous amount of work.
Wow, 66 man days.
Yep, we'd get there 3 weeks ahead.
That's amazing. So I've got a little picture I want to share here, just so people can have an idea of what that's like to set this kind of thing up. I'm just going to hit my screen share. This should not be a surprise to you either. Okay, what year was this?
Well, those are neither Rolex at all. One is Old Salem Farm with the amps on the right. That was taken literally seconds before a shot of lightning came down from the upper arena right through that booth. And I was holding those amps so the water ran underneath them as the lightning went straight down between my legs. It was quite an interesting experience. The other one, I think, is up at Bromont, when we had a truck with a crane on it, for which we put speakers on the crane. Very different. Oh,
and then here you're parked on top of a roof.
That was at Peter Green's. Yeah, he decided I needed to see the course. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So doing sound isn't the safest job in the world if you're out there in all the elements and you've got the lightning storms and there's been quite a few Rolexes where the weather hasn't been the best, right?
Many that haven't been the best. In fact, one of the most memorable days of cross country there, the rain was horizontal, and Bruce rode the most extraordinary round I have ever seen in that horizontal rain. I'll never forget seeing him ride that day.
What year was that?
Oh, I can't remember. Somewhere in the 80s.
What horse was he on? Let's put it that way.
I can't remember that either.
Nigel, that's why we have to do this, because, as we age a little bit, we tend to start forgetting things. So I think it's really important that we kind of...
Age? What's age?
All right, so we're going to roll the ball forward and we're going to go to 1982 because you the other day found a piece of video that I thought was totally amazing.
82, that was the second year of Rolex coming on board as the sponsor. They started in 81, and what an extraordinary sponsorship that was. Except that they paid next to nothing for it. They had a very strange deal with the AHSA as it was then, and now USEF, and I have no idea how they got away with not paying so much. Roland Pouton was the president of Rolex Watch USA at the time, delightful Swiss man. And I said to him one day, I said, Roland, what's this property worth to you? He said, oh, a good $1 million. They should have been paying $1 million in sponsorship. And he would have been willing to pay it, but nobody asked him. It was bizarre, but it weren't my job.
But nonetheless, Rolex was the sponsor for how many years?
Well, until Land Rover came on, what's that, 3-4 years ago?
Yep. So it's been an amazing part of the history of the event at the horse park.
It's extraordinary because the event didn't become the Kentucky Horse Park or the Kentucky Horse Trials or the Kentucky 3-day event. It got known as Rolex. And when that happened, there were only 6 events in the world that were named after their sponsor, and the only one I can think of is the Winston 500 after the cigarettes. And then everybody said, we're going to Rolex. One didn't go to Kentucky, you went to Rolex.
That's right. So I'm going to play a little bit of this film here. I'm just going to pick up from the intro. Screen share. I'm going to make this big. And what I've done is this was actually the KET television did an hour-long episode on the whole event. And you and Denny Emmerson narrated it back in '82.
Denny did it 1 year. Tad Coffin did it with me, I think, for 2 years. And KET, being the local PBS station, were just wonderful on the. They all volunteered. The whole crew from KET. They were extraordinary.
Wow. So I'm just going to let this roll for a little bit.
Kentucky, the ultimate trial, the 1982 Rolex 3-day event. Hello, I'm Nigel Casserley here at the Kentucky Horse Park, and with me is Denny Emmerson, a former Olympic 3-day event rider.
Nigel, what we're here to see is sort of a triathlon for horse and rider that takes place over 3 days and has 3 separate tests. The first day is the dressage, a series of intricate controlled maneuvers, not unlike the compulsory figures in figure skating. This is designed to test the obedience of the horse. The second day is the tough day. That's the speed and endurance day, 10 miles over 25 massive natural obstacles, much of it at a gallop. The third day is show jumping, a more precise form of jumping designed also to see whether the horse is still sound and fit from the day before.
And now for the first phase of the competition, dressage. And coming to the dressage arena now is the Grey Goose and Kim Walnes. Grey Goose owned and ridden by Kim Walnes from Woodbury, Connecticut. Combination was second here at the Rolex International Kentucky Horse Trials last year.
Okay, let's ride this one through the test, Nigel, and watch the different movements that she makes. That's the halt, and he's supposed to be absolutely quiet and square and straight at the halt. I would say that was a good halt. Now she goes forward at what we call a working trot, which is just his normal gait, his normal pace in the trot, turns to the left, and when you see her come to the letter S over there, he'll go into a longer, springier pace called a medium trot. See how his legs are springing further forward and his hindquarters are coming more under him. She'll make a circle at the medium trot and continue it up to the letter V. And at V, you'll see her come back to a quieter, steadier movement. There, you see, he's slowing down. Now she'll come down the center line, and she has to be absolutely straight, looking right at General Burton, the chief judge. And when she
So I'm going to pause it there for a second because I love the fact that General Burton was the judge.
Yes, well, what a trio of Fritz, Burton, and Thackeray. They got eventing on the map in this country. They're extraordinary. Colonel Thackeray was such a charming, delightful man too. He held an O judge in 4 disciplines, which nobody else has ever done.
And so can you tell us a little bit about these men? Because, you know, quite frankly, a lot of the riders today don't even know who they are.
No, I'm sure they don't. Well, Jack Burton was running the USCT stables up in Hamilton, Massachusetts, because that was the home of eventing then, and Neil Eyre was president of the USCTA, and Eileen Thomas was the executive director. Jack Fritz had been involved with the Essex troops years before. He was very instrumental in writing the rule books for eventing, and Colonel Thackeray was just a superb horseman, absolute delightful man.
I remember the name Neil Eyre, but you know, I can't remember how I know that name now.
Neil Eyre basically started the USCTA, and he was president for the USCTA a long time ago. Well, I fib a little bit because I'm going blank again. USCTA basically started in Virginia, but it all blossomed under Neil Eyre. If Neil hadn't been there, eventing wouldn't have never got going in this country.
Did he live in Connecticut?
No, Massachusetts, Myopia.
Oh, Myopia. So he was like Myopia Hunt. That's how I know the name.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
And the alleged horse trials.
Which were amazing horse trials back in the East Coast for many years.
I mean, he started, it was an invitational in 1975, where about 7 or 8 British riders came over. It was extraordinary. And they had a big crowd up there in 75, but nothing like what they had in 78.
So was Ledyard really where we started doing eventing in this country?
I think so. To the standard as to what it is now, yes, without doubt.
Right. And I'm trying to remember, because I think there were photographs a while ago of Mark Todd where he jumped into the water at Ledyard. I'm pretty sure it was Ledyard, and they were still photographs, and his horse disappeared because it fell in the water, but he never moved, and the horse came up underneath him and he went out of the water just fine.
It's funny, I don't remember that one.
Yeah, no, there's some very old photographs, and Allie Thurston, if she's listening, she'd probably be able to come up with that history.
But another extraordinary thing, something like that, was at Morven Park. There was a bounce on top of a hill through a lane, and Mike Plum cleared the bounce, a rail in and a rail out. Yeah, that was an extraordinary picture.
Wow.
I think it surprised him too.
I'm sure he wasn't expecting that. So I'm just going to go back to this video again, because at the time, this was the Grey Goose, and I won't play all of the dressage tests, but I'll just let it run a little bit. I'm just going to turn the sound down here. And she went on to win this event this year. And the footage has her in both some of the cross country and in the show jumping. And so, you know, I'd actually know Kim, and I'd met the Grey Goose because I met Linda Tellington-Jones when Kim was getting ready to go to Gawler, and she had Linda Tellington-Jones come to her barn in Washington, Connecticut, and I went up there and met Sally Swift, and that's actually where I met Sally Swift. So I have a real fondness for watching this video, because a lot of my memories and a lot of my history now are tied together with the fact that I met Kim, the Grey Goose, and was with Linda and met Sally Swift all at that one place, and Peggy Cummings back in '86. So kind of extraordinary.
The Grey Goose was a wonderful horse, just magnificent. There have been so many extraordinary horses over the last 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah, he was one of the tops. And so I'm just going to pause my screen share for a second, and I'm going to move this forward.
Well, I'll just run through some of the early winners here. 78, of course, Bruce Davidson won the world, the gold medal. Canada won the gold medal. In 79, Julia Bishop from Canada won. In Poltroon, Torrance Watkins, wonderful little horse.
Oh, was that the paint?
That was the paint, yep. And then Karowich won in 81, Grey Goose in 82, when we were then at just an advanced 3-day event, CCI. JJ Babu won in 83. He won again with Dr. Peaches in 84. Sasquatch with Derek de Grazia in 85. Do you want me to continue, or?
But we'll just go through the 80s and we'll pause there, because then we'll come back to the 90s later.
The Optimist and Jimmy Wofford in 86. Kerry Milliken and the Pirate in 87. Bruce wins again for the 3rd time with Dr. Peaches in 88 and 89. Then Wilton Fair, wonderful English horse, and David O'Connor won in 90. So we'll stop there.
So has anyone else won it 2 years in a row besides Bruce?
I don't think so.
On the same horse?
No, because Bruce won in 83, 84, and 88, and 89.
And 88 and 89, he won on Dr. Peaches.
Correct.
Which is pretty impressive to win 2 years in a row on the same horse.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that anybody else has ever done that.
No, and I don't think anybody else has ever won it back to back either.
Right.
Except for Michael Young in 15, 16, and 17. All with the same horse. Now that takes a lot of doing, and
Wow,
that's
that's really impressive.
and that's when it's a proper CCI 4-star then too.
Yep.
And the last 2 years, Ollie Townend won with the same horse too in 18 and 19. So.
Okay, so it has been done a couple of times, but that's a highly unusual thing to have happen.
Absolutely.
Yep, because there takes so much preparation to get to these horses to this level and to maintain them at this level.
And not to mention the expense.
Yes, yep. So in the 80s, if you were to say who was the horse that you thought was the greatest horse of the 80s, who would you say?
In the 80s, oh. Well, that's an interesting one. Poltroon was always fun to watch. Dr. Peaches was extraordinary. I don't know, there were so many good horses.
In the 80s, I mean, I was in Kentucky in the 80s because I was in graduate school at University of Kentucky from 81 to 86. And so a lot of those names that you mentioned are really familiar to me. I've been away for the sport for a while, but like I said, the names are really familiar. And if you were to think about the way eventing was, say, in the 70s to the 80s, what was the biggest change, if there was a change, between the 70s and 80s?
Not much change between the 70s and 80s, but it's then when they went to the short format in the 90s, which I think changed the whole sport.
Did they? Was it in the 90s or was it? I remember it was 2006 because that was the year.
Was it that late? Oh,
yeah, yeah. I think it was 2006.
We actually had a proper 3-day event that long.
We'd have to check. I'm sure that we can check that out. But I remember coming to help you set up in 2006 and watching, and I believe that was the first year of the short format. But we'll do a little fact checking on that.
You do some because.
And while we're thinking about that, I'm going to go back to this video. Okay?
Yeah.
And you'll recognize who this is.
Well, in 2004, they had the Bayer modified 4-star 3-day event in the short formats.
2004. Okay.
2000. Yeah, it was along with the Rolex Kentucky 3-day event. Because that was a Jack LeGoff idea.
You go to the short format.
Yeah. Which should never have happened, but there we are.
We can debate that with a lot of people.
And the old timers will say that.
Yeah. So here's an old timer.
Yeah, he certainly is.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna back that up a little bit so we get a little bit of sound. Hang on, hopefully I won't make anybody nauseous here.
Ronald Mara from West Grove, Pennsylvania. She does it well. The feet even, excellent. I would say, Nigel, that is one of the better tests we've seen and might very well be one of the better tests of the day. Going to the arena now will be Better and Better and Mike Plum. Better and Better, owned by Mr. Ronald Mara from West Grove, Pennsylvania. Mike, the really seasoned international competitor, I think probably the only man to have ridden in 6 Olympic Games, starting with Rome in 1960.
And he competed for a very long time after this.
Denny, that completes the first day of the dressage.
Right? I mean, how long?
He rode well into his 40s. Yeah.
So quite a number of years. All right, so we're going to move on here, and we're going to let you talk here on the 1982 tape.
So let us now run down the placings after the dressage. In first place is Tom Wilson and Collector's Item. Second, Silent Partner and Karen Stives. Third is the Grey Goose and Kim Walnes with Better and Better. Fourth place is Quality Scope and Mike Plum. We have a tie for 6th place of Cobblestone And Nancy
Oh,
Bliss and Phil Grogan and Karen Lundy.
Saint, a lovely horse.
Becker and Mike Summer 8th. Southern Comfort and Torrance Watkins in 9th place. 10th is Grey Tudor and Clarence Dives. And we now go to the Sweden Endurance Derby. What comes up first?
Well, the first thing, Nigel, that we'll be looking at is the steeplechase. Now, the steeplechase is the fastest part of the entire event. It takes place on a track, a rolling track with 8 or 9 big brush obstacles. The horses gallop at very high speeds, twice around, and when they end, they have a little break before they go on their way to the really major phase of the competition, the cross country.
Out of the starting box, having completed the roads and tracks and steeplechase, Willa the second and Derek de Grazia as they come to the first. What's he thinking at the moment, Danny?
He wants to get in right to this first fence and get him over it and get him going around this turn. He's got a pretty long run now down to the second fence. What I always try coming down the hill.
So I'm going to just pause it there for a moment. And one of the things that is so notable about that year was that you could barely see anything. It was so foggy. Was it raining at the time?
I think it rained the whole event.
Yeah, because it was certainly misty, and you know that always changes the footing. I mean, obviously we could debate whether it's better to have a little misty and a little bit softer than a hard footing in a hot year. But there it was clearly a very misty morning, and we saw the horses going out, and they had already completed their roads and tracks and their steeplechase and the roads and tracks part C, and then headed out on cross country.
Yeah, but you have to also remember, back in those days, those of us announcing were in the stripping shed on the old tobacco barn on top of the hill opposite the Rolex stadium. We were looking at a blank wall.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't see a horse over a fence, Lexington for I can't even remember how many. For years and years, we never saw a thing.
so how did you know who was on course?
Well, you had people on. Well, first when we first started, I used the local ham radio club, and they reported in, and then we got more sophisticated, and Motorola started making good radios, and so the fence judges then reported in. So why I've always called myself an announcer and not a commentator, because we couldn't ever see what the horse was doing, and there are so many announcers that they have a fence in the wood and they say, oh, they chipped at that one, or they came in short, but you can't say that. You can only say they cleared it or they didn't clear it when you can't see what they're doing.
So literally you were sitting at what they call the big barn, right? No, not the barn. It's the big brown barn.
The steeplechase barn on top of the hill, opposite the entrance to the sponsors row, and right next door to now the Rolex Stadium.
Right. And so you're sitting in that building and you're announcing from there, and people with ham radios are out on course at every jump and telling you what's happening.
Yep, absolutely. And ham radio operators, I used to have to brief them in the Red Cross building down in Lexington, and they knew nothing of the sport, but they were phenomenal people. They took it on for years until the FCC said it wasn't really the duty of ham radio operators to be fence communicators. Yeah.
So they knew nothing about horses, but they would go out and you'd have one at every jump?
One at every jump, yep.
And then they would watch the horse and catch the number as it went by and then just call in.
Well, the fence judges would tell them the horse number and clear or one refusal or whatever it was, yeah.
And then, so all of that was feeding into you at one time?
Yep, absolutely.
And did you have somebody there helping you to like keep track of?
Yeah, you got somebody tracking, yeah. You couldn't do it otherwise.
No, I'm trying to imagine how you did this. So you have these people radioing in and you have to keep track of who's on course and roughly where they are, because you know if they cleared the jump or not. And then
not roughly where they are, actually where they are. I mean, people could never understand that I never saw anything. But you know, you set up a rhythm, and if your communicators are good and are reporting in a timely fashion, then you can get it pretty accurate.
Wow. And so, like what would happen if there was something on course that caused a hold, like a rider or horse that fell? How did you handle that?
well, you would hear there was a hold, and one particularly, we had a long hold, and I'm searching for filler, and I'm going through the program, and I see a piece written about volunteers. So I read the piece, and it's written by Irma Bombeck, and I said, and the piece written by Irma Bombeck, the syndicated communist. That year was a good year for bloopers. Neil Air knocked on the window that one very quickly.
Yeah, I bet he did. So basically, if something happened on course, if it was at a jump, at least there was a radio there, and they could radio back to you. And so, were you the one who told everybody to hold up, or was that somebody else in charge?
No, that's all on the stewards. Okay,
so they were handling that, but the ham radio people were just radioing back to you so that you could keep track of what was happening on course and tell everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you have a hold at one place, you've still got other horses on course. The ones that are after the hold are still continuing until they finish. So it was fun. Yeah.
And then, so what happened? You couldn't have the ham radio operators anymore. So what did you move to? You moved to Motorola.
Yeah. Motorola then, I wish they had been our sponsors, but they never did. They had too much other business.
Yeah, I suppose. So then you just had someone with a handheld radio.
Correct.
And you had one at every jump.
One at every jump. Yeah.
And they were simply sound people to radio back to you? Like they weren't stewards and fence judges. They were a separate person?
No, it was generally the fence judge that was radioing. Yeah.
Okay. And so then that way you could keep track of what was happening on course.
Trying to.
Yeah. So I don't think people really, when you go to an event, and that's the thing, when you go to an event like that as a spectator, you hear the sound and you, so that you know what's going on and you can know who's on course, and so you can run to the fence that you want to see them, especially if it's headed to the lake or the bank. But you don't know, I don't think anyone ever really appreciates what goes into making a good sound, what goes into really making a quality event, and the hours and the equipment involved. I mean, I remember you used to have a huge trailer with miles of wire.
Oh, we used to carry, well, the trailer still does have about 5 miles of wire in it. And the art of putting sound into wide open spaces is that you've got to make it sound as though it's only one voice everywhere. Sound travels very slowly at only 640 miles an hour. And so you get a delay. So and people say, well, do you put delay machines on the sound? And I said, no. Well, they say you can't do it. I said, well, fortunately we could, and did for a very long time.
Put delay machines on, or just?
Yeah, on certain sets of speakers, but it doesn't work that way because the wind changes and the sound coming back to you alters. So you've got to make it like an airport that you walk from one speaker to another. So nothing's ever blasting anywhere. It's all distributed sound.
So we're going to roll back to this tape again, and I think we've got some sound we can listen to there.
I hope it was a good year.
It was 82, we'll see. There's also you and Denny talking, so there's a little bit of both.
Well, when we did the KET program, we did the voiceover cross country on Monday after the event.
Checks his own stride.
So this is Grey Goose.
Bank.
And I believe that's Penny Lane.
Yep.
Typical Irish horse, banking the bank.
I'm just going to play that back because I'm not sure people caught it, that he did bank the banks. We'll just go back here again.
Right across the ears. And checks his own stride. Checks his own
First
stride.
bank, up the bank, push off, and out the other side. There we go. Both of them. Yep.
Yep.
The bank. Lands on
But
top.
they were technically meant to have banked it.
Whatever.
Lot did fly it, but they were really meant to have banked it.
Well, he certainly did that. He used it well. All right, we're gonna roll on. So what I've done is I've picked some footage from each of the jumps that they had on this footage, on this film.
Yeah, I'm off that. You don't see him dropping his reins and getting loose in these combinations.
And he made that look so easy. There was another horse on the film that I actually took out. There was a fall at that jump. The horse came in and
Yeah, I'm trying to think where it was on the course. I think it's down where the old football fields were, which is now where the arena is, the indoor arena.
oh wow, it's quite open, but then down into some trees, little turn, and around the corner and out.
I think that's where it was.
Yep.
You're making me think too much.
Hey, it's your footage.
It was a long time ago.
Yep. And there you can hear in the background, you can hear the PA system.
Yep.
Right? So I'll just back that up a little bit so people can listen for that.
I must have done a good job.
Yeah.
The
Hang on, I'll just let this roll for a sec.
I'm off that. You don't see him dropping his reins and getting loose in these combinations. Everything is tight and precise and powerful. Mike's 42 years old, which for some sports would be coming to the end of the line, but Mike is just in his prime.
Well, there you are. You're saying Mike was 42 then.
Yep.
And he was going strong.
Now she comes back with her upper body, keeps that leg on, drives him onto the bank, leg, and off.
I love how Denny rides the jumps. So he's riding every step of that horse over that bank. It's really fun. I've got another horse doing the bank, and what I did with, I think it's this next piece of film, what I did was I did it in slow motion with a couple of freeze frames so people could see just what kind of effort this jump is. So it plays through first.
Oh, really? Right
off the top of the
tremendous drop. And when you stand up there, looks like you're on the first floor of a house.
Yes, of course, that's now the first water on the course these days, since the bank's long gone.
Oh, wow. Okay, so there's two water and this is the first water. So we just appreciate the effort of doing this bank. I just did it in slow motion with a little bit of freeze frames here.
I mean, look at that leap off there.
Yeah, that I was so impressed with this horse when I saw that and I could slow it down. I just thought it was well worth kind of spending the time to make a little bit of a little freeze frame action.
This is the toughest fence on the course, I think. And then little stride and a tremendous drop into water, splashing through, jumping up onto this big bank, caught a hind leg, and over. Beautiful ride. That guy is so good.
And so the head of the lake has become perhaps the most popular and most difficult jump on the course, wouldn't you say?
Oh, it's probably the most impressive because it's water, and you get so many elements in there that it really makes it look impressive. But the hollow at the other end of the course has always been a difficult fence. When you come back down heading for home, there's no easy spot on that 4-star or now 5-star course.
Yeah. And the water's changed a lot over the years. Now they have the ducks and other things. But back then it was pretty simple in terms of its appearance.
Well, they just used timber. They didn't have people carving ducks with chainsaws.
Yeah.
Which is very impressive.
I have a good friend, you probably know her, Franny Loftus, who designs jumps. She's designs jumps for Fairhill.
Oh, really?
She doesn't design the jump. She designs the artistic part of the jump. She's an artist.
Well, the artistic part of the courses these days, ordinary. I have just seen Mallow get up. Wendy, can you keep talking for a moment? I need Mallow, who is now 13 and a half, and she's got bone cancer, so she's...
I'll just play some footage, no problem. I can keep you entertained.
Well, let me see what... Oh, I know what she's thinking. She's thinking it's supper time, but let me put her out. Hold spot. Come on, Mallow. Mallow, darling. Come on.
So I'm just gonna back this up. I'm gonna pause my screen share for a second And actually, I'm going to change which video I've got up because I've got more of this footage from '82.
I'm back because I think she's just telling me she wants supper, so she can wait.
Okay.
She
That
can
didn't
wait.
take long. So actually, I'm just going to play. This is from the whole thing. This isn't the cuts. Make that a little bigger. Drop the sound out for a second. Oh, we might want a little sound.
And incredibly powerful leg. Just drives that horse forward. And you never see Mike out of balance. You never see Mike with his leg anywhere other than right under him. I mean, to me, this is the best cross-country rider in the world we're watching right this minute.
Quiet, flowing movement as they go up out of sight. Now down the hill to the water. And
Push, drive. I mean, if Mike horses don't want to
look at the way he picked up his reins.
and
Straight away.
immediately, and those tight legs, never out of place, and the quick use of the crop. We are watching the best cross-country rider in the world. There are probably 2 or 3 others that are close, but I think this guy is the best.
As he checks into the last, or the bench there, not the last.
Gets his reins together, checks his watch. This is a pro. This is like watching any of the top pros at whatever sport.
Over the last, checks his watch again, and on the run into the finish.
Into the finish, still in perfect control, perfect harmony, perfect round. Like,
So Nigel, it must have been kind of strange doing the television shows because you were actually watching the footage.
Yes, and hoping we were saying what we were saying was right.
Yeah, because I mean, the more I start to understand this, you actually never saw the horses on course. Did you ever have a time when you had video cameras that you could see what was happening while you were announcing?
In the last few years, we did. But the Atlanta Olympics were interesting with the camera because I had a Frenchman doing the French, well, actually it was Belgian, and he would watch the edited edition or the delayed edition of the cross country, and which is very confusing because it's 12 seconds after what actually happened. So you were listening to the radio and the reports, and then he would look up at the television camera and be announcing that there was a fall, and he'd jump up and down and say, "Oh shoot, oh shoot, oh shoot," and the horse had long gone by that time. So you have to be careful. It was only in the last few years that I did it that we actually had 5 cameras on course, and we could actually see the whole course.
It must have been so strange after announcing for so long without being able to see it.
Well, it was wonderful being able to see it. You actually could commentate because you could see what was going on.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to go back to this short film because I have a little bit more there I wanted to show people. I'm just going to bring that back up. And wait, I got to get back to my screen share. If anybody has any questions for Nigel, you can just put it up in the chats, and I'm sure that he'd be happy to answer them. Let's see, screen share screen. Clips, yeah.
Well, while you're setting it up, thinking of things that happened in the announcing booth, Nicholas Austin, who's an Englishman from Canada, was announcing with me for many years, and Torrance Watkins was about to come out on course, and I don't know why he said this, and he said, "On course now is Torrance Watkins riding Karen O'Connor." Well, that gave us absolute hysterics. We fell apart in the booth. I don't know what he was thinking at the time, but
Yeah. Well, she's coming up on this footage because she was there, but not on the little paint horse, but on the big Southern Comfort horse.
yeah.
So we'll see that coming up. Here's this. Oh, that's Mallow in the background. This is a massive, powerful horse going through here.
Yeah, look at the hands. Beautiful hands. Of course, I think Philip Dutton has the most phenomenal hands of anybody.
And so here, I'm just going to back this so you can hear what Denny's saying.
Yeah.
Because this is Torrance.
No, Terence is in the yellow.
Really
Yeah, that's what I mean. She's coming up.
huge tests. I think the problem with him is keeping him under control. They all have to ride at the same weight at 165. Yeah, and you can see those.
Yeah, and there you are. That when women then carried what lead, that was
Yep.
100 pounds soaking wet.
165 pounds.
Now, I'm going to play it back so you can hear what you
Carrying that much
said.
lead, does that make a difference?
Say again.
I'm going to play this back so you can hear what you said.
Oh,
Those pockets. And she's saddled and filled with lead. She's not 90 pounds soaking wet.
She's not 90 pounds soaking wet.
Carrying that much lead, does that
well,
make a difference? I never had.
you would never call her a big woman.
No, I just thought it was really cute.
Yeah. But think how much lead she was carrying.
Yeah, because if she's carrying 165 and she's not even 100 pounds, she's got 65 pounds of lead on there.
Yeah. Dead weight. Too.
Yep.
Not-
Totally different than if it was a person.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, you say to the modern rider now, 30 pounds of lead, you wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, they don't carry any weights now, right?
No, none. No. It'll catch weight.
Yep. So does that give women an advantage then?
Well, only if you were a better rider.
Yeah, that's true. So somebody's asked a question about how many miles and how many jumps are there in a typical cross-country course?
Oh, God, now you're making me think. Normal cross-country course now, well, it's much shorter. I'm going to say 3 miles, somewhere. Well, how many meters is it these days? There are about 15, yeah, about 3 miles. And I think it's 26 jumping efforts, something like that.
Yeah.
Or not jumping efforts, fences, many more jumping efforts.
Right, because they're combination fences where
Yeah.
there's multiple efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go back to this film one more time. Let's see if I get the right one. Share.
Off to the far end of the course, the opposite end from the sinkhole. Most falls are caused because their knees don't get up in time. The front legs don't get jerked up out of the way. Quickly over the bench there. Moving into the last. Nicely over. And Nancy looking at her watch, see what her time is. I think she's pretty early. The horse still has got plenty of run and in safely. Now she drops her stick. Getting ready to drop her stick because that.
But the fences then were much more straightforward. They're now so technical. I don't like the way that people have to gallop like a lunatic between fences to be able to make the time, and then you have to show jump the cross-country fences. It's such a different game. And then we had the problem in I think it was the early 90s, where they were making so many unjumpable fences all around the fence. Sorry, I got a motorbike going by.
Yeah.
The horses were confused. They couldn't see the wood from the trees, basically.
Yeah, so it's really changed a lot from the beginning where, I mean, basically we didn't have the ability to create the kind of complex jumps that we have now. We didn't have the ideas of it, more the technology.
And it was a lot less expensive to build too, because now the cost of building a cross-country course is just ridiculous.
Right. Yep, they were just big, bold fences, a lot of timber, pretty straightforward back then.
Yeah.
All right, so let's see what I've
I'm
got.
sorry, you've got Mallow in the background talking for supper.
Yes. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm going to show you this picture, what year this is.
Okay.
You sent me this one, so I hope you know.
That is actually at Ledyard, and that's Eileen Thomas. And I would say that was probably 79, somewhere around there. Long.
So the early years.
Yes, very early years.
I never knew you with a mustache, so.
Well, I had one for 19 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so in your lifetime, how many events have you announced?
Oh, haven't got a clue. because I, you know, did not just eventing, dressage, pure dressage, driving. I can't think.
Yeah, long time.
Hundreds.
I'm just going to show people what it's like to string wire.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. That was horse trials at Joanna Glass's right next door to the Radnor 3-day event.
So it involves a lot of climbing of poles.
Poles and trees, but as somebody said to me who was helping me one year, oh, I think it might have been Nicholas Austin, he said, I never thought I'd get paid to climb trees when I'm 30. So it's too many poles.
Yep. But there's a lot of work that's involved in setting up good sound.
Enormous.
Yeah.
And hopefully I've got it right now.
Yeah. So some of the things that I've been able to find on YouTube are some other video, and this one, I'm not sure what year this is. I might, well, while I'm looking, trying to get this organized, who is that? So if we roll forward from 82, then we get into the mid 80s and then early 90s. And so who were our winners in the 90s?
90s. All right, if we start off with 1990, David O'Connor and Wilton Fair, then Karen Lendy, who is now Karen O'Connor, of course, in 91 with Mr. Maxwell, and then Stuart Young Black from Canada. That was an Olympic selection trial year in 92. He won with Von Perrier. Bruce the next year won with Happy Talk. Then Julie Gamina, who is now steeplechase training and doing very well. She won with Treaty. And then the Olympic qualifying competition in 95, that's for the qualifying for Atlanta. David O'Connor and Custom Made. 96, Dr. Doolittle and Stephen Bradley. And that was the selection trials. Karen O'Connor in 97 with Worth the Trust. Then Nick Larkin came over from New Zealand in 98 when it was the first 4-star. Then he won with a lovely horse called Red. Tiffany Loudon and McCarvey in 98. Karen O'Connor with Prince Panache in 99. And I don't remember, Over the Limit and Kim Vinosky in 99.
So one of the things that I found fascinating is I really can't find any footage from the 90s. Like I can find the 70s, I have your tape from the 80s, and then there's like this blank spot in the 90s where on YouTube there isn't any footage, and I was trying to scare up some footage so I could have a little bit from each decade, but there really doesn't seem to be anything that I've found so far that that is the 90s. So was there a difference between the 80s and 90s when we got to eventing in the 90s?
Oh, hang on. Sorry.
That's okay. I can go back to playing some footage while you're taking care of the dog.
Oh, I actually just still saying it's supper time. Sorry. The 80s, and well, as I said earlier, that the 90s, the fences became complicated looking. It was just they put so many unjumpables in there. It was not a good time in eventing, as far as I was concerned. But then it's changed again and is now very different.
Yeah. So what I did find here was just as a comparison. Let me see if I can roll this forward. I found the head of the lake.
Yeah.
Today, this is in 2007. I'm just gonna screen share this.
I saw a note just a while ago as to when NBC started doing the event, and I can't find. Oh yes, 2004. That's why you're missing the 90s. after KET did those early years, then nothing was done until NBC did it in 2004.
Oh, wow, because this is an overview of the lake. And while the quality is a bit poor, what we can see is it's a very different looking course in 2007 compared to the 82.
Yeah, and the lake was very full that year too, from the look of it.
Yeah, yep. And this is Karen O'Connor with Teddy.
Now, that was an extraordinary little penny. Michelle Dunn has a picture of Teddy, which I'm sure you can't find, early on in the course at the ditches. And he is standing absolutely upright as he takes off. It's a most extraordinary picture.
I might be able to go look for that. I'm going to pop over there once this plays a little bit and see if I can't find that footage. He was not very big, was he?
Amazing little athlete. When you actually look at so many pictures, one has to be completely staggered as to how athletic horses are. And why do they do it? Why do they let us beat them around a course? I mean, not literally beat them around a course, but it's extraordinary.
Well, you know, I've had these really interesting conversations with a variety of people recently, and you know, it comes down to the horse really understanding his job. It comes down to educating as opposed to just you know, drilling, and developing these horses' characters and developing their ability to learn, and so that they can put together the ideas and actually, you know, you can't, in my opinion, you can't force a horse at this level. They have to love the job. They really have to understand it and love it, because it's such a tough job.
Yeah, well, I read a criticism the other day that I thought was absolutely true, that now that the dressage test is getting more and more complicated, riders are making the horses do the test, but the horses now are not thinking for themselves. And I think that's the dangerous part when you come to major cross-country fences. Horses don't go out these days and hack for miles and learn to balance themselves, and self-carriage I find it hard to even see how people ride a horse that can't carry itself.
Well, and I think that is the big difference between a dressage horse and an event horse, and that an event horse really needs to think for himself, because he's got to make decisions and get it right even when you get it wrong.
Absolutely.
And
we're the one that screws them up each time.
Yeah. So I've gone to Michelle's, I don't think this is Teddy, but I've gone to Michelle's Facebook page, and I'm going to share some of her pictures because she's given me permission. It was so kind of her. She has just masses of pictures.
I mean, look at that horse. I mean, that's on top of the bank. It's how do they do it? Why do they do it? I don't know.
Well, you look at the eagerness on his face, and he is definitely into this job, you know. And so this is where, you know, I've had interesting conversations with Dr. Stephen Peters and Sean Patrick, and the whole idea of that the horses need to be able to tolerate some degree of stress, but the reason they can tolerate that stress is because they've learned how to learn, and they know how to let themselves down. And that's such a critical piece that, you know, if you take an athlete and they get really up, but they can't let down, they're going to burn out. They're going to have injuries. They're going to break down, because the recovery is so critical to the whole process of development. And
you get burned out very quickly if you can't just let down. I don't know how. I really don't. I think they're just extraordinary creatures.
Yep. And when you look at these horses, and I'm just going to go back to her album because she has so many photos here, and I, you know, encourage people to go and go look at her Facebook page where she's posted these. It's Michelle Dunn. It's really awesome. She has years and years of pictures from Rolex and from you know, Kentucky 3-day event. And this is 2007, and I pulled up this year specifically because since that other video is 2007, I was hoping that we could find pictures of Teddy in here, but alas, there are so many pictures.
Yeah, I should have when I saw her picture of Teddy, I should have sent it to you. And mea culpa.
That's okay. But again, you know, you look at the enthusiasm in this horse, and you know, I always find it fascinating when they want to talk about the happy athlete, because I don't know anyone who's actually running a marathon that's smiling.
I've not seen anybody.
Right. And as you can see on this face, you know, this is it's in a really, there's an intensity about an athletic performance. And there, you know, he's so fortunate because the horse hangs a bit of a leg, but he seems to recover okay. And
the thing is too, he doesn't know what's coming next. He's never seen these fences before.
no,
I mean, when he lands on the other side of the fence, there may be another fence 10 feet away. I
right.
mean, he doesn't know that at the time. It's extraordinary.
Yep. But again, you just look at how eager this horse is to get on with the job. His ears are up, his eyes are up. He's clearly got some sympathetic, because you have to have activity. In other words, you know, if you never have some sympathetic in your nervous system, you're never going to get off the couch. So these horses are trained and developed and prepared to have the level of intensity necessary to do this job. And, you know, when you see the horses coming at their fences with their ears up and their eyes bright and just, you know, eating up the ground, you know that there's an, you know, and here you can see there's an intensity, you know, and maybe something's happened on the past jump, but look at that stride and look at that eagerness and forwardness in that horse, which I just think is so amazing.
I hope he's going forward.
Yeah. You better be. So, oh, this is an interesting series of jumps. I don't even know who these riders are. I've just, like I said, I've just clicked over to 2017 and, you know.
What you got?
Yep. But again, look at that eagerness in that horse to eat up the ground and get to the next fence and just be responsive to his rider. Really quite impressive.
What have you got coming up?
What do you mean coming up? Like
next picture.
Next picture. Let's do another year from Michelle here. This is 2005. So we're going a little bit back in time, but I find it quite interesting to go back more to the older photos. Can you see my screen?
It hasn't changed on my end.
Uh-oh. Hang on.
No.
Let me share my screen again. Maybe I lost that. There we go. Can you see these, a whole bunch of little pictures?
Yep.
So these are Michelle's pictures. And this horse is just, can you see that I'm clicking through them? Okay, great.
We're there now.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Sit back on that one.
Yep. That face is so familiar. Oh, it's Kathy Weishoff. That's not why it's familiar. It's like I know her. She's a Lexington homebred.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Really impressive. So as we move forward in time and we go through the 2000s, who do you have for winners then?
Yeah, where to start? 2000, Blythe Tate from New Zealand with Welton Envoy, another Welton horse bred in England. And that began the event solely as the 4-star in 2000. And everybody said, well, we could never run the event. And Janie Atkinson, who was the long time director, she and I were talking before they had it just as the 4-star. And we were expecting 40 odd entries. And she and I just said, yeah, we can make a day of it at 40 entries. I mean, it's not badminton with 120, but it worked. And I think it's thank goodness. Fair Hill are going to be really put to the test, though, coming up, whether they have their first event, this 5-star, this autumn or not. But going back to, okay.
So what did it was 2008?
No, so 2001 was David O'Connor, Gilt Edge, then Kim Severson and Winsome Dante in 2001, Pippa Funnel with Primrose Pride in 2003, and that was her first leg of the Rolex Grand Slam, which is done on, and it's a lot of money now. It's $250,000 to do it, to win badminton, Burley, and Rolex.
Wow.
And that was the first. It's only been done twice. Winston Medante won again in 2004. Darren Chacha with his Stallion Windfall in 2004. Well, that's interesting. I've got 2002, 2004s there. So, because he won the modified 3-star, 4-star. Okay. Then Winston Medante came back in 2005 and won for the 3rd time. Andrew Hoy from Australia won in 2006. Clayton Fredericks won in 2007, and I'm just going to get a picture. Hold on.
Yep.
A picture that Mary Phelps took at the presentation. Can we see it? Oops.
Hold it up a little higher.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, awesome.
That's a great picture.
Yeah.
My hair was as long then as it is now, but we didn't have. Yeah. All right. So where were we? Clayton Fredericks in 2007. Philip Dutton has his first win with Connaught in 2008. Then Clayton Fredericks' wife, or ex-wife now, Lucinda, won in 2009. And then William Fox Pitt has his first win in 2010 with Cool Mountain. Mary King, also from England, was first and second that year, which is that's an accomplishment.
Wow.
With King's Temptress. 2012, William Fox Pitt with Park Lane Hawk. Andrew Nicholson comes back again and wins with Kimbo. William Fox Pitt in 2014. Then Mikael Young had his hat trick at 15, 16, and 17, which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So
for someone to ride multiple horses, and there, I can remember back, well, I'm going back into the 80s again, but there were people that would ride 3 horses around that course.
Yeah. And then I think that you can only ride 3. You may actually only be allowed to ride 2 these days.
But did anybody ever ride 4? That would be just unbelievable.
I think, to be honest, I seem to remember back in when it first became the 4-star, Philip may have done, but I can't remember when the rule change came as to the maximum number you could ride. But
the scheduling must have been a nightmare.
Yes, but luckily the courses are long, and so you take up a lot of time that way, and you can make it back. But a quick change around for the grooms.
Yeah, because to keep that many horses going and have them at that level of fitness, and then to ride them, the level of fitness that the riders needed was just.
Oh, I mean, even if you go just a 3-star horse trial, something like Red Hills, when Philip will ride 3, 4 horses all in different divisions. I mean, he lands up doing 30 miles easily.
Wow.
Just on cross country. That's not roads and tracks and steeplechase of the old days.
Right. That's what I'm thinking, is when it was the full on with the steeplechase and roads and tracks, to do 3 horses, you're out there for hours.
Oh. Yeah, you didn't do that. You might have done 2 horses in those days.
Okay, but not 3. Yeah, because
no.
I just don't think there's enough hours in a day.
Well, not enough wind in the line.
Yeah. Oh, you froze up a little bit. So Nigel, I'm sure you have some interesting sort of behind the scenes stories of things that may have gone wrong or not, been a little bit dicey.
Well, apart from the syndicated communist, that same year, the Japanese were using the event as their trials for, what was that? Must have been for Los Angeles. And I knew the Japanese ambassador was coming to give an award. So I got together with the Japanese boys and we got his name out phonetically, completely and utterly. Well, as would happen, I looked down at the sheet as I'm starting the announcing, and we come to the award for the leading lady rider. And guess who's giving it? Well, the Japanese ambassador. So not once, but twice does Nigel say, and now for the award for the leading lady rider. Then I look down at his name phonetically in front of me, and I can't say His Excellency. It just doesn't come out. So I had to land up saying, Mr. Ambassador from Japan. And I went down the stairs immediately in the old booth, and he'd gone. So that was not a good year. And then the other really bad year was when William Fox Pitt won, I think for the second time. I went to play the national anthem, and I had the CDs set up just behind me, and someone had come into the booth, and I went to reach for the CD for the national anthem, and this person handed me a CD, and I didn't look at it, and I knew which track I had to play, and it wasn't the British national anthem. So he then hands me another CD, and again I think I knew which track I'm meant to be playing. Well, it turned out to be the Albanian national anthem. So William never got God Save the Queen. It was very embarrassing, to say the least.
Especially as a Brit.
Yeah. But you hate to think of the chances of saying the wrong thing are quite considerable.
Well, and I know that you're actually dyslexic, so you know, the ability to actually keep things straight has been very impressive.
You're absolutely right on that one, and it was Eileen Thomas who pointed this out to me back in the early years, and she said, "Nigel, do you know you're dyslexic?" I literally said, "What's dyslexia?" Because back then it was barely known. She said, "You get your numbers incorrect." I said, "Well, I can't read either. So between the dyslexia and not being able to read, it's sometimes quite difficult."
So, I mean, but here you are at a job as an announcer, and what you have to do is be able to read people's names, their bios, you know, keep the numbers straight, what number they are, what year it is. So how did you manage that?
I don't know. I have no idea how I've been announcing for 46 years. I can't. One
of the things that I've always enjoyed about your commentary, and I mean this is kind of one of the reasons that I appreciate your announcing so much, is that you know the riders, and there was always an interesting little story or a little quip or a little history or a little fill. You always had something a little special, and not just simply the rider's name and number and where they were on course or what their score was.
Yeah, and you hope you didn't bring up things that you weren't meant to mention.
Well, yeah, there's that part of it.
Like Nicholas Austin and Torrance and Karen O'Connor. I fortunately have a voice that seems to amplify well, and that's been, I think, a lot of my blessing, is that people can hear me, can understand me, and I will blow my own horn and say that the greatest compliment that I used to get was people would come on the grounds and they would hear us testing while setting up, and they would come up to me and say, "Nigel, thank God you're here. We know it's going to be a good event." And that was a very persistent compliment that I'd get, and it was wonderful.
Well, I think there's something about not only your experience announcing, but your experience as a horseman, and the ability to adapt to situations when the shit hit the fan, you know, if something went wrong, or that you were able to adapt and keep the ball rolling in spite of, and that's one of the keys, in spite of whatever chaos might be going on the inside, the public needs to know that everything's okay.
The old ducks syndrome, yep. Paddling like hell and looking smooth as ice on the top.
Yeah, and I think that is a mark of a good announcer, is that they can reassure the audience and keep them engaged in the process of what's going on and interested, while at the same time, it could be utter chaos on the other side, or it could be a long hold because there was an accident, or whatever, that you can just keep going and rolling with it and make it all work out.
The great art of announcing in my book is to give as much information in the fewest number of words.
Yep. And so I think that's really a gift.
One year at Chesterland, I'm announcing from the top of a horse box, and I suddenly see Dickie Thompson, who was running control at the time, face just go completely ashen. And I turned around right behind me where he was looking, and the helicopter bringing in the Almaden sponsor team crashed on the cross-country course. Well, that took over 2 hours of fill to keep people there. That was my worst day. That was absolutely the worst day.
Wow.
It's hard to fill for 2 hours.
Well, especially in a situation like that, that's a pretty horrific.
Yeah, nobody got hurt. It was amazing. It just dropped on landing, and of course on the course. It wasn't meant to be on the course. It was landing off the course, but it landed right slap bang on the course.
Wow, that's really crazy. Well, I think it's time for us to go to the last phase. I'm going to bring up some steeplechase, not some steeplechase, some show jumping video. We're going to go back to 82 again, because that's what I have the most of in terms of, I just think this is wonderful history to watch this footage that you had. I'm going to screen share.
Well, I got hold of KET this week, and they're going to, we did, I think, 3 programs. They're going to try to find them, and we'll get them up and on the air that people could then get them.
Oh, that's awesome. And then tell people what happened when you contacted KET.
The young lady who was in charge of programming at KET now, I said, well, this is some time ago. This was 82. If you could find it, I'd be grateful. And she said, well, I was born in 89. I said, yeah, you probably didn't know it when it happened.
I know. Sometimes it's kind of a rude awakening to people say that they weren't even born when you were in the prime of your life.
Well, I'm still not as old as my sister, though. So
oh, perfect. There you go. All right. So here we are back in 82, and we're entering into the show jumping phase. I'm just going to let this roll a little bit.
And it's on the grass.
Yes. So actually, I got to pause for a second. So if anybody's been to the Kentucky Horse Park recently and been to the show jumping arena with the stadium, this is it. This is what it looked like in 82.
Yeah. And later, I can't.
Yeah, I don't know when it was no longer grass.
Yeah. It was a lovely arena.
For the last 2 years. 1980, he won the event there, and then last year he was second at it. Now this horse, better and better,
has represented the United States in
and
all of
Mike.
the Olympic competitions since 1960.
Although this combination of better and better and Mike won the individual silver medal in the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. That's when the Americans won the gold medal there. Right? And this has got to be one of the most experienced combinations.
And so as he comes around this corner, the big barn is behind the audience there. The big brown barn.
This is
I didn't see that. That was the old tobacco barn,
right,
where we used to do the announcing in the stripping shed.
Yep.
Real young horse then.
Yeah, because you'll see him swing around and you'll see the lake.
At the highest level. Swinging very wide there for.
See, so there's the lake, so that's south.
Mike probably felt the horse needed that long approach
Yeah. But it was a nice undulating show jumping course. It
2 points for
gave the course a go.
and the 4th place, which was Shepherd's Regal.
Well, there was slope, there was
To
terrain.
have a rail
It wasn't
down either.
flat.
Certainly wasn't.
Anybody can get a clean round out of a horse. It's generally mine.
Nice to see jumping on grass.
Yeah.
Oh boy!
And it stayed. That was
That was a really tricky fence there.
Stayed up.
as you can probably hear from the oohs and ahs of the crowd. This is a very exciting sport.
And it still is.
I must have got it right the first time there.
Yeah.
So
only
just one
one
fence
to
to go for his clear round and keeping his 3rd place. And
Mike. And they retained their 2nd place.
But we've never had a crowd since.
It was huge. And they were just sitting on the grass. There was no bleachers, no stadium.
Since the World Championships and when the 78 World Championships, and when they said they were going to do the World Equestrian Games in 2010, they were talking about numbers of people, and I was in the office, and I said, if you think
Irish horse.
you are expecting 100,000, I said, you don't know what 100,000 people look like, and they, of course, they had a fraction of numbers in 2010. It still was amazing, 78.
Was a tremendous speed and scope.
And my daughter went to her first event at the World Championships in 74 at Berlin. Well, that was the year she was born.
They got a very good chance.
Very good chance of doing it.
Well, at this point, Grey Goose is in first place after cross country, and he just has to get around this show jumping course.
You can't hear it. Right through there.
A huge jump.
What a nice horse.
Yeah.
I keep holding my breath like this. We'll never be able to talk for the rest of the competition.
No,
I don't know why I'm holding my breath.
Put in a little chip stride there, short stride, but then nicely over that.
Ooh, turning very wide there to get back to this one. And we have to take it at an angle. Made no
You can do
difference.
that. Now coming to this difficult downhill combination. Easily sailed there, sailed through. She's just got 3 to go now. Whoa, she took a huge jump.
Fun to see.
Yeah.
And 1 to go.
1 to go, and she'll be the
With a proper water in.
Yep.
winner of the.
She was a happy girl that day.
Yeah, well, it's pretty impressive, you know. I mean, that's one of the horse combinations that we still, anybody who was around still remembers, still, you know, appreciates. I've watched this footage now several times because I've been editing it, but it still makes me smile.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So Nigel, of all the years of your announcing, if you were to say, how would you encapsulate all that? What I mean, it's got to have been an incredible experience. You've known all these people personally as well as professionally from years of contact with them and years of interaction. You know, like I said, I can remember quips that you would make about certain riders because it was obvious that you knew them on a personal level. But I mean, how do you, you know, how do you encapsulate all that in terms of what it's been like to be an announcer for 36 years?
Well, that was just announcing a Rolex was 36 years. I'm now on 43 years now.
43 years, yeah.
Too
And
damn
you've done driving, but you've also done a lot of steeplechase, right? You've done quite a bit of steeplechase.
Well, back in '84, because one wasn't earning enough money doing announcing
You froze up.
because they didn't all need big sound systems, but steeplechase meetings needed big sound systems, so we could then charge a reasonable fee to put steeplechase sound in back in '84. So, yeah, done a lot of sports, been very lucky, met a lot of wonderful people, had a great time. Just can't afford to retire. So when I'm 80, I may be still walking around with a microphone in my hand.
But you know, your voice really hasn't, it's interesting to listen to your voice now and listen to your voice then, because actually, you know, your quality of voice seems to have maintained itself.
That's the wine.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm not saying the quality of the wine, it's just the wine.
Just wine, yeah, yeah. No, it's been pretty incredible. And, you know, like I've known you since '92. Like I said, we met at the Pony Club Nationals down in Lexington. I remember my team, I was a coach for Wilton Pony Club at the time, and we had a viral outbreak, so the team couldn't come down. And so I went down and volunteered because I already had booked my flights and everything. And I walked into the office, and that's how we met. And so I just walked into the Pony Club office at the horse park there and volunteered my services. And you know, it's been a pleasure to have known you for all these years.
I would say likewise, absolutely. Yeah. And your career has taken some changes of being from instruction to surefoot, and I don't know how you've done it all.
Sometimes I don't know, but you know, it's the one thing we have in common. Well, we have more than one thing, but the horses and the passion for horses and the desire to see them excel and to see them being able to do their job really well and enjoy it. I just think that that's such a critical part for me, is that, you know, like you say, it's amazing that they do this for us, and it really is, but it's that you watch these horses and they get something out of this too. They're not, you know, they wouldn't do it for us if it was.
They wouldn't.
Yeah.
If they did, they'd be totally nuts.
Yeah.
And I'd like to ride a horse that's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really incredible.
Well, I thank you. It is just watching horses. I love watching horses. You know, watching young ones play in the field. It's just, you can spend hours doing it.
Yeah, it never gets old.
It does.
Yeah.
Except
what?
Getting old.
Getting old. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Older.
But it's been really interesting, you know, given the pandemic and everything. For me, it's given me an opportunity to go and have these webinars and conversations with a lot of people that I know that I otherwise wouldn't be able to do, because we're all so busy all the time. And horse people aren't the best technological people. Like, I'll just let everybody.
Oh, really? I wouldn't know that.
Yeah, we did a little test webinar this afternoon to make sure it was all going to work okay when we got started here. We weren't going to have some problems, but you know, it's just been great. I've gotten to do these webinars and talk to a lot of different people. It's been really, really fun.
Well, keep up the good work.
I will. So go ahead.
No, I'm just saying thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I have a little video to play at the end. It's the end of the 82 tape, and I think it's kind of a nice way to kind of wrap up this webinar. Just for those of you that are watching, all of my webinars are on my YouTube channel, Surefoot Equine, or this one will actually go up on Murdoch Method because it's not really Surefoot related. And you can find me there, and you can find me at murdochmethod.com. If you join my email list, you'll get an email for the next week's guest list. I've got Sharon Wilsey coming back, and I don't know who else, but tomorrow I'll put out my email with the list with all the links. But to wrap this up, I think that the end of the 82
yeah, before you go there, Wendy, somebody sent a message. Were there any messages that came in?
Super fun. Yeah, there's been, let me see if anybody has any questions while I'm queuing this up. Just put your questions in the chat for Nigel. And
let me put my glasses back on us.
Let's see if there's any. Let's close that one. I don't know that we haven't really had any questions. I think people have just really enjoyed listening.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. So I'm going to do my little screen share here, find my end.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm going to make this big. Hopefully, maybe that's a little too big. Hang on, let me just drop that back a little bit so it's not quite so distorted.
Oh, I think there was a message from my daughter.
Oh, what did she say?
I don't know, it disappeared too quickly.
Oh, let me see if I can find it. Chat. Oh, thank you so much for taking the time with us. That's just lovely. And hi, Alex. I hope you're doing well. So here's the end of the 82 Kentucky 3-day event.
The worst part of
The advanced division here at the Kentucky 3-day event, 1982, sponsored by the Rolex Watch USA.
oh, actually on a victory gallop. How lovely.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
A proper victory gallop.
Denny,
Yep.
as Tim completes our victory gallop, I'd like to say thank you to you for helping me here, and what a wonderful event this has been, and it really has been Kentucky, the ultimate trial. And now for Denny Emmerson, myself, Nigel Casserley, goodbye.
There we are. Wonderful. Wendy, thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigel. It's been a pleasure to have you as my guest, and stay safe.
And you too. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye. And thank you all for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. Stay safe and be well.